Today we're going to talk about interior and more specifically on a subject that mostly people call compact living. And the purpose is to just show you some advice on how to make your apartment feel bigger and give you the room and space that you actually need for your items. So let's get started. Firstly, my best advice is to follow, like a great architect once said, form follows function. So, what you should do is just think about what kind of functions you need in your apartment. For instance, if you love to cook and you have a kitchen that really isn't that big, there are still ways to make it functional for you and that you can still have room to chop your ingredients or have all your cooking machines, etc. So first and to start with, it's very important to just grab a pen and a paper and just write down the important needs that you need to have fulfilled in your home. So if it's having a sofa and room for a TV, or if it's a studio, a place where you can play your piano, whatever, just make a note, some kind of a list where you add all these things that you find important, so you can see what you prioritize and what just takes room without you even using them. That leaves us to the second part, which is to declutter. Try to at least once in every half year to just go through your interior. That can be also clothing items or just things you have somewhere where you have things you don't use that often. Just go through them all and see what you actually need and use and what you don't use, because the things that you don't, you can give to friends or try to sell them to someone, and it just takes unnecessary space that you can use for something that you actually need. So now when you've gone through the list and you know what you want to prioritize and what you find not that important, you can go through and see how much room each function needs to just work properly. For instance, if you love having friends over for dinner, it can be important to have a big dining table. If you're a student and study, maybe a little study area can be something for you. One thing that you need to think about is storage and colors, because colors make a very big impact on your home. If you have lots of bright and light colors, the light from outside from the sun is going to reflect further on into the room. But if you have let's say a dark gray tone on your walls, it's going to feel darker and smaller, and you can make this to an advantage or you can make it worse. So it's important to think about which colors you have in which rooms and how they feel. For instance, if you have a bedroom that's in a lot of warm tones, it can feel harder to fall asleep, and I would recommend some lighter tones and some more neutral oriented, maybe some blue shades just to make it feel more calm, and save the more vibrant colors to, for instance, the kitchen or the living room. And it's also important to think about not having everything in the same tone, like for instance ceiling, walls and floor, because it's just going to be too bright. If you also live in an apartment that's facing to the south and has a lot of sun, that's gonna be like a nightmare if you have too much of something. So it's important to just try to make it work and make it comfortable for you to live in, because it's not only about aesthetics, it's also about you having a home that you're feeling comfortable in and want to spend time in easily. Another thing people very often forget is storage. It's really important, especially if you love having clothes and everything that's gonna fit into your apartment. You need to think quite wisely, and as I said earlier, to declutter things is really a good tip, but eventually you'll find a point where you're like, okay, I've got rid of everything I can get rid of. Now I really need to want to be able to have the clothes that I have and the items that I have. So then a smart tip is just to have smart storage, and that you can do by a lot of different ways. For instance, if it's about a living room, String has these beautiful shelves, which are quite expensive and are an investment, but they are really, really beautiful, timeless. And as you can see, it looks like the items are floating on a wall. They're so pretty, and you can combine them in so many ways, which makes them really a good investment. And something you also can do for clothing is just buy, if you for instance have a white wall, you can buy wardrobe that's also white, and it's just gonna camouflage with the wall and you're not gonna notice it as much. And you can make the same. If you for instance have a gray wall, you can paint your white wardrobe to the exact same tone in gray, and it's gonna look great. Another thing that I really want to recommend is some of my quick fix advice. And the first one is to see how you have your curtains, because if you have them a bit too low, you can actually make your rooms feel shorter than they actually are. So my advice is to pick long curtains. You can also pick them a bit too long, as you can see here in this picture, and it's gonna give a more of a kind of a relaxed, sophisticated look, and looks romantic but not too feminine, if you know what I mean. And as you can see, they go way, way, way to the ceiling height, and that just elongates the room and makes it more vertical in space. And here is an example of what not to do. This feels kind of dated and not that natural, or I don't know, kind of gives me an old school vibe, which isn't really that fresh, if you know what I mean. And secondly, it's about mirrors. This is really a good tip before making a space feel bigger than it actually is. And you can do this in many ways. I found these two examples from Pinterest really nice. The first one is one that where you have a round one on your wall, and this is something that I've seen a lot in both magazines and on Instagram too. And it's just a really simple and quick way to make it feel more spacious. And you can also use a mirror that you just put a kind of angle on the floor, and this also looks really good and a bit more Spartanian and relaxed. And another tip is to, especially if you live in an apartment that has the kitchen area and the living room together, that is a round table. That's a really good investment, because you're gonna have room for all your friends and family when you come for dinner. I have it myself at home, and it's so good when you have a lot of people at home, or if you may be having some kind of a cocktail party and you just want to have some kind of room for like appetizers or just more space to put things on. It's really good, and it works very good with the room, since we don't have any room for it to put next to a wall because it's quite a small room. But because it's round, it's not that awkward. It's really easy to position it in a room, and it just feels very simple to walk through and walk around, and it's yeah, it's really good. I'm very pleased with having a round table, and it's really something you should look up if you're living smaller and want a piece of item that is very flexible. And now to two of my favorites, which is a side card and a stool, and they're both so good. I use them both at home. I have this side card from IKEA, which is very cheap, and it really saved our lives because we wanted something to have the opportunity to put our toaster and the machine for boiling water boiler, or whatever it's called, and our Nespresso machine, and we didn't have room for it because our kitchen is quite small. But this baby saved us, and it looks so good in our home, and it's really a great divider between the kitchen area and the living room because our sofa is just next to it. And we can have so much room with it, and it just feels very spacious because it's open and very thin in material. And another great piece of furniture is this one from IKEA as well, but it's in some kind of aluminum, and I would definitely choose this one if I had more space. It's great. There's lots of room for chopping your vegetables. You have even more space for kitchen utilities, and it looks very, very good. I mean, it's a great item for the price. And the other part is to have a stool. And I know that IKEA has a lot of these, especially the Frosta version is very popular. I've seen a lot of people do do it yourself projects with it because you can paint and you can put some kind of a cushion on it to make it more unique. And it's just such a great um, piece of furniture to have at home. Like I said earlier, if you want to have friends over and you're living in a small space, you can just have a couple of stools piling together and just spread them out, and your friends are gonna have seats. And you can also use it as a coffee table and put beautiful books on them, and it's gonna look great. And it's just so good to have those smart, cheap, and just flexible items that you can use for a lot of purposes. So, to shorten this up, I hope you've learned a trick or two. And the most important part is that not to forget that it's your home, you're the person that's living there, and you do it for yourself. And that's why I think it's so important to go through your things, get rid of things you don't need, and just focus on what do I want in my apartment. Do I want to have a space to cook, a space to paint, whatever. It's really important to get to know yourself and prioritize the things that you need to feel good about your home. And this doesn't mean that you're gonna ignore the aesthetic part. You can make this and design as a part to make your functional desires come true. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Have a great day. Bye.